Hey, how's it going, everybody, and welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and today I've got my top 24 wide receivers here for Week 11 fantasy football. These will be my wide receiver 1s and wide receiver 2s for 12-team leagues here again in Week 11 as we approach today's matchup. If you'd like access to the rest of our top 48 wide receiver rankings in addition to our other positional rankings here on a week-to-week basis, check out our website, sizzlefantasy.com, and get yourself signed up for a month-long subscription of SFS Gold. One potential way, however, that you can get access to SFS Gold for an entire month completely free is by checking out one of our great partners here on the SFS channel, Thrive Fantasy. And today is Thursday night, which means we've got, well, it's not Thursday night yet at the time of posting this, but it will be. We've got Thursday Night Football tonight between the Atlanta Falcons and the New England Patriots. You can check out my prop, or one of the two I've made for today, right here, and you can go check out the other prop we've made for this evening by checking out our top 24 running backs episode, which has also been posted in addition to this video here today for Week 11. So we're taking the under for Kyle Pitts. You've got a really banged up Falcons offense here. There is the potential he goes over, and I will acknowledge the risk. With no Cordero Patterson, you've got yourself Calvin Ridley out of the situation, obviously taking a step away from football. There might be an element where Matty Ice literally just has to force feed Kyle Pitts the ball to score points for this football team with them being so shorthanded here. But I'm going to bet on Bill Belichick, this Patriots secondary, and the fact that they are going to take away who I believe is the top remaining weapon in this Atlanta offense. And then on the other side of things, I'm going to take the over on Damian Harris's rushing yards, returning cleared from concussion protocol, and I think he'll have himself a decent performance and be able to scrape over that 57.5-yard marker, despite the fact that it's not a cakewalk here in the opposing rushing game. So, with that being said, go check out Thrive Fantasy. The way you can get that free month of SFS Gold is by signing up for a new account, depositing between $10 and $100, and when you do so, use promo code SIZZLE. That'll get you a 100% deposit match bonus. So you can get $100 for free if you go in, open up your Thrive Fantasy account, and deposit $100 with code SIZZLE. And then in addition to that, they will get you set up with your free month. Well, they'll let me know that you went ahead and deposited, and we'll get your free month of SFS Gold set up. And again, you'll get access to my private DMs. I'll set your lineups for you every week, and you'll get those rankings. So with that being said, that's a lot of yapping. Let's hit the intro and get right in to our number one wide receiver here in Week 11. Alrighty, we've got a lot of wideouts to cover here. Again, 24 names we'll be going over. I'll be talking briefly through these players. I'm not going to go into a ton of detail again because I don't want this episode to take forever. And hopefully you guys will also go check out that running backs episode as well. So Tyreek Hill is my number one wide receiver for Fantasy Week 11. The simple facts here, Tyreek Hill is the number one wide receiver option in an offense that seems to be back to what they are used to doing. Kansas City came out against Oakland last week, or Las Vegas actually. It put up quite the showing. Tyreek Hill's got 9 or more targets every week dating back to Week 4. That's pretty impressive volume. He's getting the job done. A very, very high ceiling as well, this matchup against Dallas. They do have Stefan Diggs. They are a ball-hawking secondary unit. They'll take some turnovers away, but they are a bit over-aggressive at times, and for a burner like Tyreek Hill, with a quarterback who has a rocket for an arm, this could result in some splash plays and a pretty high ceiling for Tyreek. That's why he gets the number one spot here. DeVante Adams against Minnesota gets my number 2 spot. The ceiling hasn't quite consistently been, and it really hasn't been even near where it was last season on the consistent basis he was getting those numbers. DeVante only has 3 touchdowns this year, and that is also a very low number for him over the historical trajectory of his touchdown production throughout his career dating back to 2016. He is, I believe, the number one player in reception touchdowns over that time span. But this season, again, he's very down in that category. This week against Minnesota, though, I still don't think there's anyone on that football field that can guard DeVante. Unless you put 2 guys on him, shade his safety every single play, there's really not much you can do except for hope to limit what he can do from an output perspective. Aaron Rodgers gets another week under his belt here of practice. He was actually out of practice the other day for a heel injury, so he wasn't suited up and out there in action. But I'm confident that he'll get back into this week, get back into a groove here, and again, shake off some of that COVID rust. He looked a little bit clunky at times against Seattle. Now, they did ultimately pitch the shutout, get the job done there. But I think Aaron will get a little bit cleaner this week, and DeVante and Aaron should get back to hopefully putting up their normal productivity numbers here. Deebo Samuel, you could probably make a case to have him at number 2 here. At this point, he might be one of the most explosive players in the NFL. I mean, the things we've seen from him so far this year have been absolutely spectacular. The San Francisco 49ers lined him up in the backfield last week, and he looked like he could be a 3-down workhorse if that were his position of expertise. He's a big body dude, imposing after, once he gets out in space and makes contact with defensive backs. He's a tough tackle. They showed a very amazing stat on Monday night. He's bigger than both of the 49ers' top running backs, that being Eli Mitchell, and I believe the other running back they put up there was Jeff Wilson in that stat metric. But Deebo Samuel's a big boy. After the catch, he's got burners as well. This week against Jacksonville, if San Francisco plays the way they did last week, they should be lighting these guys up. If the run game gets going and then they can set up the play-action pass with Jimmy G and just get the football in Deebo Samuel's hands, he's going to have a huge game, no doubt about that this week. Stefan Diggs, number 4 here against the Indianapolis Colts. We saw a very welcomed sight last week, and that was Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs doing Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs-like things. These two I talked about all offseason are the picture-perfect wide receiver-quarterback combo. You've got an excellent, precise route runner with burners and the ability to make spectacular catches. And then, like Patrick Mahomes, a quarterback who has a cannon for an arm and can launch that football downfield. Stefan Diggs had his best output of the season, 8 grabs on 13 targets, 162 yards, and a touchdown against the Jets. Here against Indy this week, not an overly easy matchup, but one that doesn't intimidate me here. I'm hoping Stefan can get that 2020 energy channeled inside of him here and finish out this season strong with lots of boom performances. CeeDee Lamb, high on the list this week, number 5 against Kansas City. But I love the potential upside here. You've got what could turn into and evolve into a shootout against KC this week. Obviously, with the Chiefs' offense only being back into rhythm per se for one game, it's not a guarantee that both of these teams are lighting up the scoreboard, but that's the initial trend and feeling that we get here. It seemed like only a matter of time before Kansas City would get out of this funk and this slump, and that's something we talked about on the channel over the last month or so, waiting for this to eventually happen here. We talked about Dallas being a very opportunistic defense and getting those turnovers, so there's the potential here that Dallas could get up by a few scores. In that case, though, I think they're going to capitalize offensively, be able to move the football downfield. I'm not intimidated by what the Chiefs' defense has done the last 2 weeks against Jordan Love's led Green Bay Packers in his first NFL start, and then against the Raiders, who honestly looked dysfunctional, and they looked like they were out of sync last week, not prepared for that football game. So I'll take CeeDee Lamb here, one of the most explosive wide receivers in the game, a super balanced offense, and the fact that they should be able to impose their will on this Chiefs defense. I think CeeDee has another great opportunity for high ceiling numbers. He had 25 points in an impressive showing last week. And for that reason, he's above A.J. Brown on the list here. Now, I love the matchup against Houston. I think A.J.'s got a wildly large opportunity to have incredibly successful numbers down the stretch of this season. But the last 2 weeks since losing Derrick Henry, the production has been down, and it hasn't been quite up to the standard and the par that we've seen in the past from him. And obviously, he started off this season slow. Then he got things moving, Derrick Henry goes down, and now this whole offense is trying to regroup and figure out what their new identity is here. And I think that's been a transition for A.J. Brown, and especially last week, he played the Saints, one of the best running defenses in the league. You're not able to hit those play-action balls. You're not able to stretch the field as effectively, and while they have a very solid corner in Marshawn Lattimore, that results in a very, very modest showing from A.J. Brown and a quite pitiful performance if we want to go that far. You know, I think A.J. here against Houston has the chance to redeem himself. I think that the Titans should be able to generate some form of a run game and then in turn set up that play-action pass game. I think A.J. bounces back this week. I like the upside. And long-term this season, A.J. Brown's got some pretty nice matchups down the stretch. Mike Evans here is my number 7 wide receiver against the New York Giants. The one key factor that could be, the variable that could be altered ahead of this contest is Antonio Brown's health and status for this game. Now, he's been hinting on Instagram he could potentially return. We don't know. This is all speculation at this point. He is back and running. We do know that from AB's IG. That's going to be a big player here. Antonio Brown has been the most targeted player on a per-game basis by Tom Brady since he signed with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, he's missed some time, so the total targets will not show that. But Mike Evans is a very, very great option to have in lineups when Antonio Brown is not in the lineup, and he's a very, very good one as well, even when AB is out there. But he's especially good in these games when it's just Godwin and Evans here. Mike is a touchdown monster, 5 TDs in his last 3 weeks against the Giants. Again, this is a team that's defense has been trending upwards the last couple of weeks here, but I still think is very exploitable. Tom Brady and this Tampa Bay team, after being embarrassed against Washington, should bounce back, have a really great week of practice, and then translate that, I think, into productivity here in this week's matchup. Justin Jefferson is someone I actually wanted and really tried to convince myself to put higher on this list, but somehow the Packers, despite being without Jair Alexander, have managed to have a very, very stout scoring defense and a very good bend but don't break defense. Over their last 5 weeks, they've allowed just over 11 points per game. That's a pretty dang good marker for a team missing a lot of key defenders. I think Justin Jefferson ultimately will still have a productive game here, even if he's not finding the end zone 1 or even 2 times in this contest, because that Packers red zone defense has stepped it up a notch here over the last month or so. I still think he finds a way to have a lot of yardage and to find a way to still be a very productive wide receiver 1 in this contest. Again, the Packers secondary, those safeties in particular, have been preventing a lot of over-the-top plays. Adrian Amos had 3 huge swats against Tyler Lockett on deep shots from Russell Wilson last week. That's going to be something that's going to be key in this matchup. If Justin Jefferson can do damage underneath and get yards after catch, I have no concerns about him in this matchup. JaMarr Chase against the Raiders is my number 9 wide receiver here this week. This is a tougher matchup than you would expect, especially given the not so elite personnel that the Raiders have in their secondary. Now, we are talking about a Raiders secondary that did just get absolutely flamed and torched against the Chiefs last weekend, so that's potentially something that, you know, they cut Damon Arnett, and they've had some other transitions back there. JaMarr Chase might just have himself a nicer opportunity than what the face value of this Raiders secondary being the 6th toughest matchup for opposing fantasy wide receivers. So I just like to bet on the fact that JaMarr Chase and Joe Burrow are coming off a bye here. I think that the chemistry between those two, having a week of practice to clean up 2 ugly losses back-to-back against the Jets and against the Browns, and in particular, JaMarr Chase didn't play too spectacular in either of those games. He had a couple of drops in both of those contests, and then ultimately Joe Burrow threw that pick 6 on that goal line target to Chase against the Browns. I think that they hopefully took steps forward in practice this week, got things under control, and if JaMarr and Joe are able to hit that signature fade route and get one of those explosive plays downfield, JaMarr should be in line to pick up right where he left off prior to the bye and even the weeks prior to that when he was having those very, very high-scoring outputs. DK Metcalf against the Arizona Cardinals, another player who's trending up for me this week. Now, he did have a very, very quiet game against Green Bay last week. That goes back to some of my concerns about Justin Jefferson here in Week 11, but DK's quarterback, Russell Wilson, has had that game to shake the rust off. We don't know if he was really ready to play that game due to that finger injury. Was he truly a player who should have been out there competing in that contest, or was he rushed back? And there was emotions flying. DK ended up actually getting ejected from that game late. I think Metcalf will be fine this week against the Cardinals, though it's still technically up in the air how this game script could play out because we don't know if Kyler Murray is going to be in for this matchup. He's been practicing. DeAndre Hopkins has not. So that's some interesting dynamics to keep into consideration here. And one thing I will note, for those of you wondering where D-Hop is in today's list, he actually did not make it. And that's for the sole reason that I don't want to put someone on the list who might end up not playing. Now, you can have your arguments either way about DeAndre Hopkins. Like, yes, theoretically, if he's out there, he's absolutely a top 24 play this week. That's something that I'm sure I'll deal with comments about in today's episode for those who aren't catching this bit right now and don't end up seeing that. Yes, I am acknowledging DeAndre Hopkins would be a very considerable lineup play against a Seattle secondary that's not all that fantastic. He would make the list. He would be a very, very... I mean, he's basically a must-start player if he's healthy and suiting up for a contest. But again, he's been out 2 weeks, hasn't been practicing this week. That hamstring's still bugging him. I'm going to be conservative and cautious this time around with DeAndre Hopkins in the top 24. So DK Metcalf, though, hopefully Russ can take some steps forward from last week, show that he is fresh and ready to go, and those two can ultimately do what DK and Russ do, and that's hit big plays over the top and score touchdowns in the red zone with DK's massive frame. Chris Godwin, a lower-end wide receiver 1 for us again in that Giants matchup. You've got the uncertainty about Antonio Brown. Is he going to be out there? Is he not? Chris Godwin's a very talented player, though. For a big slot wide receiver, he's got a very safe floor in traditional games. And again, that Brady bounce back, something I think will trickle down to these wide receivers. And again, the Giants defense has been playing better as of late, but I still think Chris, Mike Evans, and then the quarterback situation, you've got yourself a situation set up for success. And I think Godwin can again be a lower end wide receiver 1 this week. Keenan Allen is someone I debated back and forth. Do I want to put him over a Chris Godwin, or do I want to have Keenan down here at 12? Ultimately, I think the ceiling is just a bit higher for Chris Godwin, so that's why he gets the nudge here. But Keenan the last 3 weeks has absolutely been trending up, having some of his best games and most impressive performances of the season. Taking on Pittsburgh this week, I mean, he's got the last 3 weeks 11-plus targets in every game and 13 or more fantasy points in each contest. Him and Justin Herbert are clicking. That offense looks very good, despite the fact that the Chargers lost last week to the Vikings. I'm still liking what I'm seeing from these two. So Keenan Allen remains one of the top floor assets in fantasy football. Marquise Brown taking on the Chicago Bears this week. The Achilles heel of the Bears defense, which statistically is actually playing better than what the eye test might tell you. And the Bears are just losing games, rather, because of inexperience and because of the fact that their offense has been playing so poor and honestly putting their defense in bad situations. But Hollywood here, as a field stretching asset, can make a big player or two over the top in this game. He's been getting targeted at a very, very high rate. 12 or more have come his direction in each of the last 3 weeks. I think he should add a lot more points. He left a lot hanging on the table last week, whether it was passes thrown to his feet by Lamar Jackson. The Ravens really struggled in the humidity in that game. Marquise was cramping up in that contest. A lot of things weren't going right for the Ravens, so I'm not reading too much into that down performance. You know, the box score would tell you that that was something to be worried about, but the actual eye test and what was going on in that football game was actually reason for optimism, because for an offense that inserted a first-round pick at Marquise Brown's position, Lamar Jackson has clearly shown us that both of these players can thrive here and that the chemistry he's already got developed with Marquise Brown is going to remain a constant for the rest of this season. DeAndre Johnson taking on the Chargers, one of the tougher secondary matchups this year. The Chargers have played very good ball in the back end, but I don't really think that matters too much. DeAndre Johnson does a lot of his damage near the line of scrimmage, catching passes out in the flat on wide receiver screens and getting the job done after that. He also has exceptional route running. And just with the targets that Ben Roethlisberger gets him, I think he's got one of the best fantasy floors, maybe outside of Keenan Allen. I've talked about how he's kind of stepped up and replaced Allen Robinson in that top tier of fantasy floor wide receiver options. He's only the wide receiver 23 right now, but again, he's getting it done every week. 8.5 or more fantasy points every single game he's suited up this year. DeAndre Johnson's one of my favorite PPR assets and definitely a player who deserves a weekly start. He's not the flashiest guy in the world in terms of the numbers he gives you, but we love ourselves some DeAndre Johnson here at SFS. Tyler Lockett, how about him at number 15 against the Arizona Cardinals? Had one of the best wide receiver games of last fantasy season. 200 yards and 3 touchdowns against the Cardinals in October of 2020. Not saying he's going to do that again this year. That's basically unprecedented numbers. He's probably never going to have a game of that much output again in his career. But the opportunity is there. Now, this is not the same Cardinals secondary that it was last season. This is not the same Seattle Seahawks offense. And clearly Russell Wilson, being most likely less than 100%, is going to play some impact. But what I loved to see was that in Russ's first game back, he was not playing cautious football. He was airing it out. He was throwing passes downfield, trying to get chunk plays, in particular to this man, number 16, Tyler Lockett. He tested my Packers secondary, threw it deep, and like I touched on with DK Metcalf earlier, Adrian Amos was doing a great job covering the center field coverage zone of the Packers secondary and was knocking those passes down and actually intercepted one of them. He probably should have had 2 picks, but one of them he got flipped over backwards weird and then ended up dropping that one. But besides the point, Lockett was getting deep shots last week. If he does that again here against Arizona, he might just hit this week if Russ is feeling a little bit better and if Tyler Lockett and him are more on the same page. It's, again, a rust factor. You just got to shake that off, get through it. Amari Cooper at number 16 here. Amari's been boom or bust all season long. That's been the situation. That's been the reality of this Dallas offense for Amari Cooper. CeeDee Lamb has stepped up and taken over as the top dog in this passing offense here. And that's not an indictment on Amari Cooper, but it has affected his fantasy consistency. Now his ceiling is very, very high because, again, when you're running the football and passing so effectively, you've got dang near a 50-50 split in Dallas this season. the defenses have to be honest. And when you've got two boundary players with the talent that Cooper and Lamb have, they're going to make big plays. It just so happens that he's now become the 1B option to CeeDee Lamb's 1A. So, Amari could be in line for a boom week against Kansas City. I talked about this could turn into a shootout here. That's something that could potentially be at play. But if Cooper doesn't get the looks and the targets thrown in his direction, it's just kind of been he either gets the volume or he doesn't. And he's been the guy who's gotten the short end of the stick more often than not of the two. It could really go either way. So, again, there's not too much security in playing Amari Cooper, but you basically have to because of the upside he has, unless you're one of those teams in an 8-man league that has an absolutely filthy wide receiver core. Michael Pittman, now at number 17, I would like to have him higher. He's been very, very impressive as of late, trending up for sure in our rest of season rankings and putting up some very quality numbers, a player we've talked about as a must-buy candidate a few weeks back. It's a tough matchup, though. This is the most difficult one-on-one coverage assignment, in my opinion, right now in football, and that's Tre'Davious White. He was having very, very effective performances against fantasy wide receivers and shutting them down for the most part throughout this season. We've seen guys like Terry McLaurin struggle. Now Corey Davis was able to produce in spite of that last week. But the point is this Buffalo defense is for real, and they have, again, put in a number of fantasy wideouts to the test. However, given the nature of the Colts quarterback this week, I don't know if it scares me as much as it typically does here. Carson Wentz is still going to throw this ball to Michael Pittman. He's still going to lob it up and give him a chance to win a couple jump balls. And when you're 6'4" and have the wingspan that Michael Pittman does, he might just come down with a couple of those, maybe even score a touchdown here. So I would say the floor is certainly lower than it's been the last few weeks for Pittman here. You could have a bust game in store for him. But with that being said, I'm not sitting him because I trust that Carson... This is a weird thing to say. I trust that Carson Wentz is going to make the poor choice to just chucking it to Michael Pittman, even if he's not open. So even if there's not separation there, even if Tre'Davious White does his job to a T, I'd expect Michael Pittman to get a couple of, again, jump ball opportunities. And if he can just win the contested grab, he might just get the job done for us. So for a number one wide receiver in his offense, it's certainly a player who deserves to be a wide receiver too in lineups this week. Next up here, we've got Jalen Waddle taking on the New York Jets. And this is a bit of an opposite situation. So Jalen Waddle has been a floor play for us for the past 4, 5, 6 weeks now. He is not necessarily tapping into his ceiling as much as I expected him to do this year, but it's definitely something that's still at play. Last week, one of the things I love to see was that he was given an opportunity to make a play downfield and win a contested grab, and he did that against Marlon Humphrey. So very impressive things we're seeing from Jalen Waddle. He showed us he can win contested grabs in those situations. But what you love is the volume of targets he's been receiving near the line of scrimmage and getting the job done after the catch. And that's something that, again, hasn't given him the best upside that he could potentially be having this year, but it has given him, again, a very stable floor. 8 or more targets for the last 5 games, 8 or more points in 4 of those 5 contests. So Waddle's someone who's trending up for me. I think that in terms of a rookie receiver having a really strong finish to a fantasy season, Waddle's a name to keep your eye on here. I would definitely give him a start in PPR leagues against the Jets this week. Adam Thielen against the Green Bay Packers. Again, this Green Bay defense is playing a lot tougher than people, I think, give them credit for right now. And it doesn't seem, again, because Jair Alexander is out, it doesn't seem like they should be playing so well. But I think Adam Thielen is still a respectable wide receiver too this week for the simple fact that he's a touchdown scoring threat anytime this team enters the red zone. Him and Kirk Cousins just have a chemistry down there, and it works. Adam Thielen is a great possession wide receiver. He's a vet, he's savvy, and he has very sure hands. So I think that while he does struggle at times when he doesn't score those touchdowns, because he can be very touchdown dependent, he's still able to find the end zone at an efficient enough rate to make him a lineup-worthy play almost every week here. So he'll likely be working on Green Bay's second corner almost every snap of this game. I would expect now maybe Eric Stokes, Green Bay's top corner right now, won't travel with Justin Jefferson, but depending on how Minnesota chooses to scheme things up and line things up here, Thielen shouldn't be working against Green Bay's toughest coverage assignment. I think that also bodes well for Adam here in Week 11. Terry McLaurin against the Panthers here is my number 20 wide receiver. This is one where you look at the Panthers secondary, and that's what gives me the most worry here. Terry is another one of those wideouts who's had struggles with consistency this year. A main part of that, and I believe the main explanation for that has been quarterback play and just getting enough worthwhile targets thrown his direction that are actually catchable passes and that give him an opportunity to win the coverage matchup that he has. Terry's a very talented player. I see this every time I talk about him. He's explosive. He can win at the catch point, and he's got wheels. He can fly down the field. We saw his rookie season. I think it was like the first 2-3 weeks of the year. He just burned right down the middle and scored on deep ball touchdowns. Terry is an awesome player, but again, Stephon Gilmore is the leading cornerback for this Panthers secondary. It's a tough team. They've got A.J. Boye back there, C.J. Henderson, and I always talk about this as well. J.C. Horn, their first-round pick, is still on the injured reserve. So they are absolutely loaded at corner, and I didn't even say Dante Jackson's name. So they've got themselves one heck of a secondary unit. Terry's got his work cut out for him this week, as does Taylor Heineke going up against Cam Newton. That should be a fun storyline and game to watch here as Cam is taking on his former head coach, Ron Rivera. So, or at least it sounds like Cam will be the starter for Carolina. I guess I shouldn't just pencil that in and assume that's the case, but he is getting the majority of the first team reps at practice this week. T. Higgins, another name who is trending up for me right now. I really like the work that T. Higgins has done in his last 3 starts here since returning from the injury that he suffered early on in this season. T. Higgins has been a very dependable wide receiver 2. Now he's a lower end wide receiver 2 because JaMarr Chase sucks up so much of the value in this pass catching offense here. But we talked about it with JaMarr Chase. The face value tells you that this Raiders secondary is a tough matchup. It says that they are the 6th toughest opponent against the fantasy wide receiver. But last week, they got absolutely sliced and diced by Patrick Mahomes. Now, some of those plays were simply Mahomes magic, Darrell Williams mossing a corner, and some oddball plays. But Joe Burrow and this Bengals team, they have some personnel, they have some playmakers as well, and T. Higgins is one of those names here. He's got 9.5 or more fantasy points in his last 3 performances. They're coming off a bye week. They should have things tightened up and ready to go here for a productive outing. I like T again as a lower-end wide receiver 2 here. DJ Moore taking on the Washington football team. DJ has been very, very underwhelming since the hot start he got off to this year. 10 or fewer fantasy points in his last 6 games. So we're going on a month and a half now of this lackluster production. I'm still a DJ Moore fan. I still think the talent is there. The main issue for me, like a Terry McLaurin, is he's suffering from bad quarterback play. He's suffering from Sam Darnold's wild passes, from his inaccurate looks he's getting. Let's hope that Cam can't be any worse passing the football downfield and just getting DJ the looks he really deserves at this point, to be honest. Because he's shown us, when given the chance, when given the opportunity, he can be a dang productive player. He just needs the requisite passing attempts and passing accuracy to get that job done. So Washington's an exploitable secondary. I think DJ Moore can get the job done here again, as we've said many times. It's just going to come down to Cam's ball placement. And at the end of the day, that's been the issue for DJ Moore. It's been a hurdle he hasn't been able to overcome for, again, a month and a half now. We'll see if he can get the job done. That's why he is the lower end, or at the lower end stage of this wide receiver 2 rankings list. Brandon Cooks, you could actually argue, might deserve to go above a DJ Moore this week. But I'm going to give DJ the benefit of the doubt. Brandon is our number 23 wideout against Tennessee here. Heading into the bye week, Tyrod Taylor targeted Brandon Cooks 14 times. But as we've seen with quarterbacks returning from even week-long absences, in the case of Aaron Rodgers, they tend to have some rust and to have some shaky performances in that first game back. And Tyrod did not look very good in that game. But again, you've got a bye week. You're coming off that, cinch things up. Now, that's not always going to be the case, but that's something that we always hope can be factored into the expectation here. Maybe the Texans organization is not one to pencil that in for here. But Tennessee, they've got an exploitable secondary. Brandon Cooks is clearly the best skill position player in this offense. And as a result, he's going to get the football tossed his way in return. Again, we said 14 targets in that last contest. Was he able to produce super effectively with those looks? No, but the targets are still there, and every once in a while they're bound to hit on one of those big plays. We've seen Cooks do it throughout this season. And then last but not least here, how Mike Williams has fallen down the rankings list this year. It's been a consistency issue. We've now got 4 of those massive boom performances to 5 of the ugly bust games. So you've got more misses than hits throughout the games that we've had be played this season. That's an issue. Mike Williams is an awesome talent, but he's always seemed to got a nagging injury, banged up with something. Pittsburgh is definitely an opportunity for him to even things up at 5 apiece, 5 booms, 5 busts. But with that concern and with that level of non-guaranteed floor numbers that is especially the case with Mike Williams here. There is a strong element of risk. Again, he can go out there and win your fantasy matchup for you in a given week if he puts up the huge ceiling numbers. But is that really something reliable that we're going to get on a consistent basis? The answer to that question is no. So Pittsburgh, let's hope he can go out there, score a couple touchdowns, hit a couple big plays over the top. But there's a very real chance that he could once again be hindered and slowed down to a very, very quiet game. Alrighty, those were our top 24 wide receivers again here in Week 11 Fantasy Football. Don't forget, go check out Thrive Fantasy, sign up for a new account, and use promo code Sizzle. When you deposit between $10 and $100, they'll give you that instant deposit match bonus. So again, if you put $100 down, they'll give you another $100 for free, and they'll contact us, let us know you helped us out here, and we will get you hooked up rather with a free month of SFS Gold, which will get you the next 24 players on our weekly rankings list, in addition to all other major and relevant fantasy positions, your quarterbacks, running backs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses. And then you'll also get access to our personal and private DMs in the community Discord server, where we will answer your questions, give you guys advice whenever you have it or are in need of it, and we'll also set your lineups for you on a week-to-week basis. So thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace out.